أهلا وسهلا. Hoş geldiniz.
Bienvenidos.
Selamat datang.
Welcome to Speaking Our Mind podcast, where health is more than healthcare.
Welcome to Speaking Our Minds podcast, where health is more than healthcare. This is a podcast provided by the City of Nashua Division of Public Health and Community Services. I'm your host today, Savitri Horrigan, Behavioral Health Strategist, and I'm with Irada Munoz, Public Health Strategist.
Hola, ¿cómo estás? Bienvenidos.
Welcome. And I'm also here today with Tori Markiewicz, the Community Organizer for Granite State Organizing Project, Nashua Chapter. Welcome, Tori.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
I'm so excited to dive into our topic today. I'd love just a really brief overview of what Granite State Organizing Project, or GSOP, does and what your role is.
Yeah, I'd love to. So GSOP, we're a statewide nonprofit, and we do community organizing. We got chapters across the state. And basically we work on whatever issue the community has in mind and thinks is the most important. So here in Nashua, we work a lot on affordable housing, the homelessness crisis, immigrant rights, things like that.
Awesome. That's all incredible work and also interconnected and related to public health. I'm curious if you could expand a bit more on what work you do to support immigrants.
Yeah, so 2 years ago, we led a community leadership training for Spanish speakers. And we've been working with that group ever since to work on community issues. Lately, we've been doing a lot of know your rights trainings for immigrants, as well as connecting folks to immigration attorneys. There's a lot of people that get scammed by going to immigration, getting their papers done by people who aren't accredited immigration attorneys, and they end up losing a lot of money. So that's something that we help to try to do, is connect people that we know and trust. We also are connected with a mutual aid fund for immigrants in the state of New Hampshire. And that's especially to help folks who've been hurt by deportation. So maybe they're in detention right now and they need help paying for a lawyer, or maybe someone's family member got deported and they're having trouble paying rent without the extra income from that person. Mutual aid fund gives out $500 grants. So we help connect people to that as well.
Wow, that's incredible. I would love to hear about, you mentioned kind of trust building with immigrant populations, doing know your rights trainings. I've been to a couple of those. Could you tell me a little bit more about those?
Yeah, so we talk about how everyone who lives in the United States has constitutional rights regardless of your immigration status, and especially the right against search and seizure where there's not a warrant. And we've been seeing that a bit, as well as your right to remain silent. And that includes not signing anything if you don't understand it or you don't have a lawyer present. We've heard from people who call our immigration hotline, which is another thing that we provide that I can talk about, that they had a family member get arrested by ICE and then felt pressured to sign a voluntary deportation order. And a lot of people do sign it so that they don't risk sitting in detention for months. And that's something that we always advise against.
I want to ask you, Tori. I call her Tori because we were together in several circumstances here in the City of Nashua. The City of Nashua Division of Public Health and Community Services work with different partners for folks that are listening to this episode. And we had cases where we had circumstances of some constituents, some people that seeks for education, right? And partners that are trying to find information and education. And we partner. We are always, Savitri Horrigan and me, Iraida, we go and educate folks in these topics, right? With your knowledge, Tori, we have been able to educate different partners, right? We did some work in the past helping folks to understand their rights, not only the community members, but also partners, right? Partners in terms of how to what are the limits of letting ICE come into their facilities, because there are certain rules and certain laws that we have to respect, right? Because no one is above the law. We have to respect the law. So can you speak for those boundaries and what we are mandated to do in open spaces? And we have to respect that, some spaces need to be open for those circumstances.
Yeah, I remember I spoke to public health about letting ICE into the clinic if they ever showed up. And I've also spoke to a lot of churches who are concerned about this because, they are open to the public every Sunday or Saturday, and when they have service. And some of their congregants may be immigrants or may look like immigrants and are afraid because the government used to not send ICE into protected spaces like churches, but they got rid of that rule. And so people are worried about that. And the thing that we advise is to have signs on doors within your building saying private. And so those are places that cannot be entered by law enforcement without a warrant. Besides that, on private property, you always have the right to ask people to leave. But it is tough because even if you do everything right, it doesn't mean that your constitutional rights will be respected, but it's always best to be prepared.
Also, it's a hard subject to talk, right? So your organization, you go to places and educate folks. And we have witnessed some of those trainings. Savitri and I, we started doing some Know Your Rights trainings as well, but then we were able to join some of yours. And we've seen how people bring some of those questions and they are uncomfortable questions that they bring because it's such a hard subject, right? So right now, there's so many families that have been affected, and I know that the subject continues to be very sensitive. So can you speak for those families that you are serving as a community organizer that I know that you support directly? Can you speak for some of those families that are receiving direct services? How Granite State Organizing Project support those families that are left behind?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier our immigration hotline, and we originally started that a year ago to have people call if they see ICE in their community. That number is 978-219-7586, and that rings on my phone and my coworkers' phones. And we have groups of trained volunteers around the state that can help respond to an ICE sighting. And we can't stop the detention, but we can record and try to support anyone who's left behind. And since then, the use of that number has expanded. It's just a number that immigrants or other people who can call for help. So we have had a number of people in Nashua who have either been deported or someone in their family has been deported. We connect with them either through Angela Mercado, who was interviewed before on this podcast, or through the hotline. And we have supported those folks by helping them get connected with immigration attorney to try to support, like, for example, there was one woman whose husband was detained during an appointment at the ICE building in Manchester. And he was immediately sent to Louisiana, and we helped her with a $500 grant from the Mutual Aid Fund to help go towards the legal costs, and we help set her up with an immigration attorney, and we check in with her. There was another woman who reached out for what we call accompaniment. She had an appointment at USCIS for biometrics. She had to get her fingerprints taken for her asylum application, but she was scared to go in because she's heard of people getting arrested in other places in the country at USCIS appointments. We have not seen that here in New Hampshire yet, but we gathered some volunteers together and we went with her to the appointment to show community support and just to also be there with her in solidarity. And that ended up going totally fine. She was in and out in 20 minutes, got her fingerprints done, and then was able to go home. There's another man in Manchester who we've been in relationship with for a few years who was arrested for a driving infraction in Manchester. And so we got volunteers to go to his court hearing to show community support, and then we went with his wife to bail him out of jail. After that, he did end up getting deported later, and we've been trying to help his wife, who's disabled, with rent payments.
Wow, that's incredible, all of the work that you all do to support people in these really traumatic situations where there's a lot of uncertainty. And it's so important to know what your rights are and what help is available to you in that moment. It's bringing to mind for me, one of the things you mentioned before was sometimes people can encounter scams, especially when they're maybe wanting to get help with with documents, and maybe they go to not the right person, like a notary person instead. And then also I'm thinking about, I'm privileged to be on the board of the American Civil Liberties Union of New Hampshire. And one of the things that they do is they have I'm sure you all work very closely together too in partnership. But they have this, I forget what it's called, but it's like a packet or a document to support family and children after separation, to make a kind of plan for if a family separation happens, what happens to those vulnerable.
Is that the emergency packet that it's created to help the families that are left behind? Is that how it's called?
I think you're referring to the family preparedness plan.
The preparedness plan. Yeah. You're correct. Yes.
Right. Yeah. So an emergency preparedness plan. Could you talk a little bit more about what that kind of looks like for folks if they're interested in, they're scared and nervous about this happening to their families. How can they reach out to GSOP and someone can help them kind of navigate that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we have packets of family preparedness plans printed out for people, and this has to be done ahead of time. So that's why it's called the preparedness plan. But basically, it's for immigrant parents who are worried that they may get arrested and deported and their children would remain in the United States. What would happen to their children? Who would take them? And would it be temporary or permanent that they would be giving up their parental rights, or would they just be giving the children over to be cared for a certain amount of time by another family member, or friend, or neighbor, or something like that? So it's like a legal pathway, and it's a way for them to set up their kids for success in case the parents get deported. For example, gathering medical documents and making sure the school knows that they can be picked up by this person, things like that.
One of the things that I've seen with that packet is it has a lot of good information in one place, but it also helps families to have, someone else to have hands-on on the right information at the right moment. But Tori, one of the things is really people hesitate to fill up those packages because they don't want to think about it. It's so heavy to face that reality. So my question to you is, how do you convince them to even, face the reality they should prepare for these circumstances? Because I have tried multiple times with some families and they just don't even want to think about it. It's just so hard for them to face the reality. They have to get ready in case something happens.
Yeah, I would say we've been largely unsuccessful at convincing people to fill it out. We tell everyone that we have it and that it's an option, but I think you're right. No one wants to think about that. It's incredibly depressing to think about leaving your children behind.
Right, because it's an incredibly traumatic and emotional experience of families being separated in such a manner, and they're all working so hard every day. You have a million responsibilities.
It's also against your nature as a mother, as a woman, to even think that you have to leave behind your children. I think it's just inhuman. It's just something that you just don't want to even think that that's a possibility, but unfortunately it's the reality that we're living in. So my other brain side, right, the rational brain side is telling me, yes, we have to get ready because this is what we are facing and what we're living, the reality we are having to live. So, it's easier for some of us that are not living that reality in our own skin. But at the same time, yeah, someone that is in that circumstance, they have to like really prepare.
I'm wondering if you could talk a bit more about some of the other barriers that you've observed for folks who are maybe trying to apply for assistance, for example, with like social services or housing assistance or food assistance, or even just like public health services like for vaccines.
Well, I was telling Irida last week that the Spanish-speaking group that I've been working with for a couple years have really noticed that there's just an increasing lack of community because so many immigrant and multicultural and like ethnic celebrations are being canceled because of fears of ICE or hate. And it's just means that there's less spaces and places for people to gather and
It's demoralizing.
Yeah, it is. So that's something that we've been thinking about, and they want to put on an event to speak to Latino parents about the issue of childhood autism, because several folks in our group have autistic children.
Yeah. So what we have been speaking is maybe at public health. Maybe not. We are going to do it. We are ready to jump in and help out with whatever we need to do. So what we have been thinking is we're going to put together a task force to just go and visit this group and address their questions, right? Because there's no need to hesitate on any services. We are ready at public health to just educate. So that's our job, and we can deliver it in their own main language. So that's something we're going to be doing. We're going to visit your group very soon with some of the nurses with the right information. We have the data. We have the information ready. So we're going to plan for the next meeting that you have. And we're going to plan for an episode in full Spanish so they can get the right information. So that way they can, the ones that cannot be present in person, they can listen to the information. Hopefully they can share it with others.
Going off of that conversation about autism, it started a conversation about the debunked idea about the fact that vaccines cause autism and how the immigrant population is hesitant to get vaccines, both because they don't necessarily trust their doctors, but also because they're worried about this increase in diagnosing their children with autism, and not everybody wants that.
Right. They want to do the best thing for their families, and also a lot of them maybe have had experienced, personal or family experience with like medical oppression and just mistrust because of the way that the history of medicine has been in this country has negatively impacted a lot of immigrant populations. That's really critical information to share and just, let people have all the tools in their hands to figure out what's best. Thank you so much for all this important information, Tori. What is the best way that people can contact GSOP if they want to connect with your services?
Well, you can call the hotline. I'll repeat the number again. And that's, again, if you see ICE anywhere, but also if you or someone you know needs any help related to immigration, that number is 978-219-7586. And you can also email me. My email is Tori M. That's TORIM @granitestateorganizing.org.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tori, for being here today and talking about all these amazing services that you provide for the community. Thank you all for listening to this episode, and until the next one, please take care.
Thank you.
أهلا وسهلا. Hoş geldiniz.
Bienvenidos.
Selamat datang.
Welcome to Speaking Our Mind podcast, where health is more than healthcare.